And we're going on to item 5, which we're responding to the cost of living crisis update, pages 235 to 60, and that's over to Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Chair, and good afternoon, members. I'm delighted to bring this paper to you as a follow-up. Only 5 weeks ago, we brought a range of investment to Cabinet, which was approved over £3 million, around 6 key work streams of fuel, energy, money, community, business and wellbeing. We also ran a really well attended elected member and partner seminar, and that has helped us to flesh out these proposals even further. I do think in a very short period of time, in 5 weeks, we've captured the imagination of our workforce and our communities and our businesses, and we're moving at pace now to respond to the challenge that we face. We're going to hear a presentation from Jo Gibson today, our Head of Wellbeing and Recovery, that's going to outline some of the progress that's been made and the foundations that have been laid, and also put further proposals to you around further investment in wellbeing of our communities and of our workforce. And also we'll hear after Jo's presentation the deferred paper from yesterday within the context of cost of living from Andrew Kennedy around the review of school meal payments. So I'm going to pass over to Jo now, and she'll outline where we've got to so far in this.
Hi everyone, thank you, Councillor. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to sit here to do the presentation because I have a bit of a health condition. We're really grateful today to be able to bring you this update. As Katie said, in 5 weeks, quite a lot has happened. I hope you'll see the significant progress. We also have people in the room here who are leading on some of these key elements, so we can go into more depth on any area that people would like more information on. I've just taken really some extracts from the paper and put into a few slides just to try and give you a bit of a summary of where we've got to. I'm going to speak first about the communication campaign, and then we're going to look at more detail on each of the 6 themes we've been working on. So in terms of the communication campaign, I presume if you've been in the country, you have seen some of this happening. The social media campaign started on the 21st of September. So comms team have posted a total of 40 themed comms processes, and across all of those themed topics, we've had 84,000 impressions. So that means it's been seen 84,000 times. The suite of promotional materials that we shared with you back at the Spotlight session last month has now been shared online and across a variety of groups, including faith groups, community groups, GP practices, schools, larders, and with CPP partners. So as an example, 25,000 postcards have now been distributed. East Ayrshire CVO are helping us distribute campaign materials and are now displaying the materials in food banks, CVO venues, their mobile facilities, and the Feet First service for people who are housebound. The internal bulletins and targeted theme messages have also been circulated widely through our internal email systems. East Ayrshire Council will now sponsor the Chronicles Food Bank Appeal, which will start next week, and the same branding and campaign message that you've seen so far will be printed on those donation bags and distributed through the newspaper. And finally, our display advertising campaign begins next week and will run for the month of November in all the main local titles, including the Ayrshire Post and Kilmarnock Standard. This is an example of some of those themed posts that colleagues in comms have been putting out, and we're inviting people to drill into more detail on the subject that's of interest to them. This shows the areas that we've had most hits, most areas of interest from the community in terms of the topics we're covering. And so far, not surprisingly, the majority of hits coming straight through to money advice. In fact, some people are bypassing the cost of living landing page and going straight to money or business or food support. But we are definitely seeing these resources being well used. Moving on then to where we got to when we last met. So when we had the Spotlight session with yourselves and partners, there was a range of new ideas came up that day from our discussion groups. we themed them and we've summarised them on this page. There's a more detailed summary in your pack. There's also an evaluation in your pack about that session. But these are the main new ideas that came up that day. Many of these have now been incorporated into the delivery plan under the 6 themes, and hopefully you'll see that when we look at progress. Some of them are slightly more challenging and leads are still working through the detail of that. So that will develop over the coming weeks. So on to the main 6 themes. So just to remind you, these were our 6 themes. These were our ambitions under each of those when we first spoke 5 weeks ago. And we have progress on all of these. So I'm going to briefly go through each theme and tell you a bit about what's happening in each area, and then we can come back and get more detail on any of that as you so wish. So food first, because it's close to my heart, but close to everybody's heart. So the food larders and the team supporting them have been incredibly busy. There's discussions undergoing about opening or expanding the provision in Patna, Cattrin, Mauchline, Sorn and Dalrymple. So far we spent just over £5,000 equipping the food larders and getting them ready for expansion. We've extended a pilot in Ross Court, which is a sheltered housing complex in Galston, to invite the community and staff to join the lunch club, and we're seeing more people join that over the days and weeks. The development chef is working on food programmes alongside dietitians in the NHS to develop training programmes that we can teach communities to use food wisely, nutritionally and at low energy cost. There are discussions with the head teachers, and I've strategically placed myself right here for this very reason, so that we could consider using the home economics kitchens outside of school time in order to produce food for the larders and other lunch and dinner facilities. During the October holiday week, 110 parents and young people participated in the lunch programme, and also during that week in the holiday activity programme, 1,858 packed lunches were delivered and 575 hot meals were delivered. You might have seen on social media last week or this week, I'm all mixed up, about the 10 young care leavers who undertook a 2-day master chef class, and then were able to cook for and serve for 40 friends and family and some of you VIPs. So capacity is growing in terms of our ability to eat well together. Kirk's style kitchen, which is currently empty, is going to be opened next week to start producing more hot ready meals to supply the larder, so we can increase that whole flow of hot food. So I'm going to move on to energy and fuel, and initially you'll see as we come through this, we've talked about energy and fuel and community as 2 separate themes initially. They're starting to merge into one, because what we want to do to improve energy involves doing things differently with communities. So forgive me, I don't have a separate slide on communities, but this covers both. So the main body of work, and we've got people here in the room and online, including Annika and Linda and others who've been working in detail to develop a programme of warm welcomes, or what we're calling at the heart of your community. So based on the conversation we had last month, this is the non-stigma, very warm, engaging place in every community, many of which are already there. So we're benefiting from not having to say, here's a new thing because you might be struggling. This is your library or your leisure centre. This is what's here for you. That's the difference of the message. So that warm welcome programme is underway. There's been quite a bit of work done around creating the atmosphere, the branding, the sense of comfort and welcome that we're trying to create. So although all the buildings will be different, you will know if you're in Mauchline or Cattrin that you're getting this warm welcome in the heart of your community. There will be some similarities. So some of these venues are already opened or can be opened immediately. We're still in discussion with some communities about opening more of those, and we'll come on to a programme of meetings with communities that you're all invited to shortly. We're actually going to start sending out messages today to communities about the availability of this in the heart of your community warm welcome from today. And finally, we're looking to expand the offer at the Visitor Centre at Dean Castle to offer a free cinema in the auditorium, initially starting with festive films and then hoping to roll this out across other wards. This is a wee, is it going to move? I don't even know which direction to point. There we go. This is a wee kind of design sketch of some of the materials we're developing for the warm welcomes. They'll all be branded in the heart of your community. So we've got some items on order, rugs and plants and nice coffee machines and things. So this will feel similar in all these various locations that anybody can attend. And as you'll see, we're not really putting a big cost of living banner over this. We're not really saying this is anything other than this is an asset in your community and you're most welcome to join us. In terms of money, one of the other big themes, as we've seen on the communication campaign, this is the topic that most of our citizens are choosing to look for support on the website. You agreed at our last meeting that we could extend the Loudon pilot into all of our school communities over the next year. So in progressing that, 4 of the 7 financial inclusion officers have now been appointed to facilitate each of those 7 catchment areas. 2 early year financial inclusion assistants have had their contracts extended so they can stay with us and do this important work. And the rest of the recruitment's underway, both internally and externally. The Universal Credit Team has developed a toolbox talk for staff on energy crisis and budgeting and income maximisation so that any of our staff in contact with members of the community can offer initial advice and signposting. And so far we've spent over 150,000 on grants to tenants through the Tenants Grant Fund to prevent homelessness and sustain tenancies. Just on that question of the financial inclusion officers. In Cabinet yesterday, there was some discussion about the Loudon pilot that had taken place and what the learning of that was. So John Dalton, who's with us today, we circulated with his help an elected members briefing yesterday. Hopefully you got to see that with just a bit more detail about the Loudon pilot and how that worked and what the impact was. So it was a 1-year pilot. And we talk about that like that's an army of people. It was one person. Her name is Julie. And Julie ran this pilot in the Loudon Academy and the associated schools and early years centre, particularly trying to offer help to low-income families with financial or benefit issues. The service was promoted in terms of contact Julie, not this is cost of living or this is financial inclusion or do you need help with your benefits. The posters all said contact Julie with her photograph, and that seems to have worked really well. So that's an approach we'd like to replicate as we expand this across the other schools. The financial inclusion officers will be called their first name, and it will be quite an informal relationship. So the financial gains generated by that were just over 140,000. I think this is the most quoted figure in East Ayrshire in the last fortnight. That was across a range of benefit areas that are listed here, some about free school meals and clothing grant provision, some about educational maintenance grants, child disability payments, council tax reductions, etc. What we have learned from this work is that our evaluation, we've been capturing the financial gains, but not in the categories that might be most helpful. So John and I are designing an evaluation for the expanded service that will mean we'll capture those financial gains by benefit type. And also it might not just be benefits, it could be other cost pressures such as energy or rent. So we'll capture it by type and we'll also capture it by schools. So we have a bit more detail of impact that we can study afterwards. We also intend to ask the families how they found the service so we can learn from them about if there's improvements we can make. And interestingly, hopefully also around what we call this kind of work in the future. So of the families that Julie worked with, 36% of them were from decile 1 and 2 areas of the SIMD and 81% were lone parents. So moving on to our next theme of business. So there was a recent, really well attended and highly thought of workshop led by Zero Waste Scotland with a number of businesses attending, and they provided advice and tips on energy costs, reducing carbon footprint, reducing food waste within the hospitality sector in particular. Another major development has been that our business team have developed and distributed a survey to all businesses in East Ayrshire, and 272 businesses have replied. That has been really helpful in telling us some of the key areas that businesses are worried about or want support on. So a local event is now being organised to begin to work through each of those issues with the businesses and ensure we have support in the right place. In terms of the Community Wealth Building Programme, we have already received 7 and 4 is 11 applications, 7 of which now have been approved to a value of 35,000 and 4 more are working through the process. The IT or digital team are developing a net zero online application form, a customer service form, and looking at options for businesses to be able to obtain the audits, which is a criteria for applying for the fund I mentioned above. And finally, we're retendering the Be Ready programme, and that includes an addition of net zero and energy consultancy support. Our next big theme was well-being. We agreed in the paper that we recommended to yourselves at last council that we were likely to see an impact on people's well-being with the cost of living crisis, and that the IJB were asked to consider providing non-recurrent resources to support mental health and addiction services. The IJB met last week and we're happy to approve that additional resource. So that commits 950,000 over the next 2 years across mental health and addiction services in the HSCP and in the third sector. So that will see additional mental health nurses, mental health practitioners, addiction workers and recovery workers, occupational therapy and counselling increasing across East Ayrshire. In addition, and having further considered it, one of the recommendations we'd like to place before you today is to help us increase capacity for our mental health first aiders and suicide awareness training to expand. We actually have an ambition to try and double the numbers who are already trained, and we already have over 300 people trained. But we think that for something around £50,000, we could double those numbers and just have far more people in the community being vigilant and being courageous enough to ask the right questions and take the first steps. So that's one of the recommendations today. So that has been a whistle-stop tour across the 6 themes in progress to date. This is a really fast-moving situation nationally. The situation keeps changing, as you're aware. So again, we will need to monitor. What we agreed last time when we talked was that it was really important that we could understand what was happening for communities and what impact these initiatives were having. So these are the measures we've set up that we've identified to begin and track some of that impact. And these will be measures that we'll be delivering you information on in the updated briefings on a regular basis. I think we're thinking fortnightly. The black measures are the ones we're already tracking and that have been agreed. The red measures are ones that are under development just from conversations in the last few days that we think would be useful. And again, keen to hear your feedback on that. So finally, taking us back to the recommendations in the paper, we're asking Council to note the progress of the communications campaign and the progress of the delivery plan with the 6 key themes. Note the output from our recent spotlight session and some of the actions that will be progressed from there. Actually, I didn't mention this. To note the programme of engagement events that's in the back of your paper, one of the appendices. So you'll see from the 1st of November, we have a series of engagement events across communities in East Ayrshire to ask communities what would help them, but also to ask communities what they would like to do to help each other. So the programme and venues are there in your pack at Appendix 4. We have them in all electoral wards and you're very, very welcome to attend. And finally, to consider and the proposal around increasing training capacity for our mental health and suicide awareness champions in order to create that additional support in communities. So, Katie, I'm happy to pause there. Maybe I'm hand back to you.
Thanks very much, Joe. I think just, we've added the extra item to the agenda, so I just need to seek clarification whether we move straight on to Andrew and he takes that paper, or whether Council want to deal with these recommendations first.
Yeah, I think there's some discussion about these recommendations. There was some members wanted to get in on this paper. So if that's okay.
Deal with those first.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Coughlin.
Thank you, Provost. Joe, thank you very much for that, and for all the work that you're doing. Just to refer very specifically to the Loudon Academy pilot, I'm delighted to say I've met Julie in Loudon Academy and she's doing a terrific job, absolutely terrific. And I suspect that figure of 140k would be higher. I don't think she's yet been out to the primary schools and the ECCs, but I do think the figure would be higher if and when she does get out to those schools. And I'm delighted that we are extending that programme elsewhere, because it really is so good. During a visit to Galston Primary School a number of weeks ago, along with Councillor Clark, we had a good old tour of the school and ended up in the canteen. I don't know why, but like you, I'm a foodie, so perhaps it was just a sort of natural thing. But one of the things that did come to our attention is the amount of food waste from the school kitchens. And I think, and I know, Mark, that it's something you're very keen to be working on, is actually minimising the amount of food waste. And I just felt it appropriate to highlight that at this particular stage for so many different reasons. I think that's something that is critically important that we focus on. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Thank you. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Provost. Yesterday's Cabinet actually had raised some concerns about some of the terminology that we're using with the financial inclusion. So contact Julie. Absolutely love it. Well done, whoever came up with that. To me, that takes away the corporate feeling or the coldness. So that initial contact is starting from the right tone of voice and building that relationship. So I think that's fantastic. Or not necessarily Julie, whoever it's going to be, because there'll obviously be 7 of those officers. Also yesterday, I raised the suggestion that we try and put in as much early intervention as possible, so we don't end up in a formal debt recovery process with individuals. For me, that's a bit like, I think it was Desmond Tutu, we should stop pulling people out the river and go upstream and see why they're falling in the first place. So really pleased to see those recommendations here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leader.
It's just to echo points that others have made in terms of like the warm welcomes idea and the support that we're already giving to the existing voluntary sector. And I think, repeat myself, I think what we've seen in Loudon Academy is really pleased to see, particularly when, as Sally mentioned there, it's maybe only just the senior level that we've tackled so far, and it seems to, I think it was 81% lone parents, which tells us there's quite a number of people still to see. And given it's one of our smaller campuses, just a wee question: is it enough? And if we need to put more resources around about it, well, then probably we should. So I think we need to keep an eye on it, because that figure is quite significant, and there's no better way of dealing with the cost of living crisis than to put money into people's pockets. And I think the other issue in terms of mental health and addiction services, we saw that in an earlier report, just how the trajectory in these two areas are going the wrong way. And when we're treating social isolation and some of the problems that we've inherited, I think we need to put a good resource round about it, and some of the things that we're doing with lived experience and peer workers in our voluntary sector, this will be welcome by then, and and I think welcome by our communities. So pleased with this so far. The only question that I was also wondering about, somebody mentioned fortnightly updates. I'm not sure if it's fortnight or monthly or what's, just something that's sustainable. Is what I think we'd be looking for. But other than that, these are good proposals.
Good. Could you maybe, Joe, is it fortnightly, monthly?
I actually can't remember. I know we had this conversation with Kirsty and Jim, who are going to help us with this work, but could we come back to you on that? If people are open to either, we'll see what is most doable, and also where we'll have quality updates to provide that it's moved sufficiently. Thanks.
No, that's great. A dynamic thing as well. So the report's going back if there's any change. That's good. Councillor McFadden.
Yes, I'd like to ask about the business paper, the grants to try and help business become more energy efficient. I realise we have to have some criteria, but having to go through all the hassle and the work to get the audits done and everything before you even apply, that will rule out some small businesses where there's only 1 and 2 people or 3 people in them that are busy all day anyway. And the largest difference you could make is probably in lighting. Probably for the smallest amount of money as well. You could change all the lighting from strip lights to LED in a wee workshop or a shop, or a small affair for probably only £1,000, and you don't need a audit to work out whether that's going to make a difference or not. The LED lighting costs about 1/10 of the price to run, especially during the winter. Well, all the time, the lighting can be the most expensive item because it's on all the time for the business to operate. So I wonder whether we should consider, if businesses want to do like a upgrade to lighting, whether, we could just take them on individual basis without all the hassle of going to the, the audit and the energy thing and, involving other people. And, that I feel that's just going to make it for a bit more suitable for bigger businesses. And anyway, definitely there's absolutely no argument that, swapping out the lighting is going to save lots of money for the businesses, reduce carbon footprints, be better for everything. That was my thought.
No, thanks very much, John. I think it all comes down to lumens then, where education, they've got to be the right amount of light. But I think David McDowell might be able to give us some insight to that. David, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We brought a paper before Cabinet, and one of the issues was indeed that situation where we'd have an audit carried out, and this was, primarily to help businesses. The situation is in future grant support will be done through that approach. So Business Energy Scotland was one of our key partners, as was University of Strathclyde, who both are helping us with that. We are also looking at working with Scottish Enterprise for a number of products that they've just brought out that can possibly assist. The however part is, I would agree with Councillor McFadden, there are small businesses that are there that they may want to do some small subtle changes, and from that we'll obviously have to consider how we can take those on board. We are the actual audit process allows you to have a comprehensive review of your business and identify what changes you could install to move towards net zero. But in practical terms, there are things such as LED lighting that you could introduce that would have a quick here and now support that will help. So we are being flexible. We may have to bring back an alternative report just to kind of set out what those changes have been, because of obviously the decision was to take forward a review, but we will obviously consider those smaller businesses in that to see whether we can actually be more acute. I think the figures that Joe had highlighted, there are businesses out there. When you look at the survey, I think I noted 46% of the surveyors have come back to say that they had already started an audit, and 25% were planning to do that audit. I do know that the Business Energy Scotland are inundated, and that capacity issue means that we have to reconsider how we actually better support the businesses, and indeed that 27% that haven't had said that they weren't planning to undertake any formal audit.
Well, thanks, David. But a very good point for John about the lighting. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. It's following on from Councillor McFadden and what David McDowell just said there as well. I mean, one of the problems of being a very small business is that you don't own your premises and you might not actually be allowed to make changes to those premises. And in Scotland, we have the most appalling. The lease is the leasee is responsible for everything. It's not like when you rent a home and your landlord's responsible. When it comes to a business, your landlord can do whatever exactly they want. Now, you could put in thousands and thousands of pounds of investment into your building, and at the end of your lease, they can turn around and say, I want the wood chip back on the wall, thanks very much, and the radiators. So I don't know how we go about that. I don't know if we can make representations or anything, but this is an appalling situation that we found ourselves in. It's a legacy. So it's good to know that some of the small businesses are making changes, but there's little incentive for them apart from bringing down their energy bills at the moment. It could cost them in the long run. So thanks very much, and I'm glad to hear that it's been addressed.
Thanks very much. Councillor Ingram.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo my thanks to Joe and the team, and obviously the actual campaign and the work done so far. I was glad to see the kind of making sure that individuals who are housebound have that kind of first foot, and just to point out that those people who might be the first point of contact will be council workers who are helping individuals in our communities. What I also want to say that I like the highlight on what benefits we're actually able to get through the financial inclusion team and what has been then taken up by those individuals after speaking to them. What I might add, if it's not already been included, is who that first point of contact is, and then that'll let us see like what avenues are maybe been more effective for those individuals taking that up. So yeah, just maximising income for individuals and families is definitely the way to go, and thank you again.
Councillor Mackay.
Very much. Now, Joe, forgive me if I just have missed this within the papers. Thank you very much. In terms of the response in an incredibly short space of time to increase the number of food larders, how many new food larders have we had from the cost of living seminar?
Thank you, Councillor. Can I pass that one to Mark, please? Thank you.
Sorry, what was that question, please?
It's quoted here that we've seen an increase in the number of community larders in Scotland in Scotland. Well, and we really do run Scotland, I know. Slip of the tongue. That's just a wish, really. Feel better. Cost of living seminar, the community larders, Mark. How many have we seen new since the cost of living seminar that we've got?
How many have we seen used?
New.
Sorry, new. There's no new ones now. We've had discussions with the Rimble as the latest one, and we're waiting for further discussions with the partner Storm. We've had pre-discussions with, but there's work that the communities have to do to get those premises ready. And again, we have to meet with Partner and Mauchline over the next couple of weeks. So they will be the newest ones that we've opened, or we will open.
That would be an additional 5 then. So the 22 are the existing, and we've got 5 potentially on the pipeline.
No, that would take us to 22.
Oh, that takes us to 22. So at the moment, what we've got operational
17.
17.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. I think it would be really helpful for us, Provost, just all as elected members, to have a list of that, and again, sort of, operating hours as well, because then we know if we are ever faced with crisis, we know what we can actually pass on. That would
Okay.
be great. And then obviously just updated then as these additional 7 come on, 5, sorry,
Yeah.
5 come on board. That would be helpful. Thank you. So actually we've got 17 at the moment and 22 is what our expectation is. That's great. Thanks very much.
Just to point out, at the moment, the information on all community larders and food banks are all on our website on this page, with all the opening hours and key contacts within those. Okay, but we
Thanks,
can share the full details with members.
That's great. Thanks. Could I just say, whilst I completely endorse what the proposal is at paragraph 63 within the paper, I think it is worthy just to say that it's an absolute tragedy that we are actually having to, again, have issues that we are having to address like this against these papers. And whilst, of course, I would like to endorse and approve the proposals to build capacity in the health and safety team to deliver wellbeing support, I do think it's tragic that that is the extent and the gravity of what we are actually facing today.
Okay, thanks, folks. I think that's yeah, leader. Is that a legacy, Dougie?
No, this occasion. No, just a wee point I missed out myself. It was about the tenants grant fund. You know, I know some of this was from the government, some of from ourselves. Just was want to know just what's the take up been like, and is it our own tenants, or is it a mixture of ourselves and other RSLs, or are we able to get to the private sector as well? It's just to know how this is getting, how people are getting assisted with this, because it's a good sum of money.
Thank you, Provost. I think I might have a colleague. Yes, there's Blair with his hand up online. Thank you, Blair.
Thank you, Joan, through you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Reid, for your question. The government funding to the council for tenant grant fund was £190,000, and we've used that to really good effect in East Ayrshire. We've paid out grants to around 120 people, individual households, with a total value being spent to date of just over £161,000. Again, like I said, we've used that to good effect, and we have seen a really good split across local authority tenants, receiving about 60 of those awards, housing association tenants receiving about 25 of those, and also about mid-30s for private sector tenants as well. And clearly, when you earlier in this morning at council, you've seen statistics round about increased sustainability of tenancies, really low levels of repeat homelessness. We've really used it to address some of those really pressing matters. Thank you.
Okay, Dougie. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Provost, and apologies for this morning. I was attending a funeral earlier. It's just on the hot meals for food larders. I think that's a fantastic initiative. It's really good. But just in the back of that, Joe, so are all our food larders, do they have refrigeration appliances, freezer appliances? And, you know, I wouldn't like to see all that effort going to waste, you know, if the food's going to waste. So I know particularly in Cross House, it's just a very small fridge that they have. So if there's any support to, you know, supply any appliances as a freezer, then that would really help, if that's possible, under consideration.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's okay, we'll over to Mark. Yeah, Mark, please.
Thanks, Chair. Most of the larders, or all the larders, were given support when they opened up for fridge and freezer capacity. If there is a demand, it's all based on demand. So if they tell us they need 20 ready meals, we'll send 20. If they need 30 and they can store them, they will store them. But the idea is to send them out weekly. So they send them out weekly based on demand, rather than produce food to be frozen and obviously controlled, because we want to leave their freezer space available for other items that they would either buy or bring in. So that's the idea behind that. But they do need additional support, and we can assist with that.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Provost.
Good, thank you. Councillor McMahon, then Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to come on and endorse Councillor Mackay's sentiments previously stated there. I sometimes find it difficult myself to fully understand why we're in the circumstances that we're in, considering we are, or should have been, a really wealthy country. It's having the amount of food banks and expanding the food banks, as Mark's just told us, really disgusts me. But it's a situation we're in. I can only be thankful that the Director of Finance went to a different school of economics that the previous Prime Minister went to. So, thank you.
No, okay, thank you very much. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. And it's regarding the food larders. And again, it was a bit like the Wild West, going back to the beginning of COVID and how far that they've come. But I understand that the pressures are increasing and that the amount of food that's being made available to them is decreasing as well. So I was just wondering if Mark could maybe give us an update on the situation, how he sees it progressing. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've got a few elements that we're looking at, and we're obviously purchasing additional items that we feel are items that are probably more expensive or harder to get or not being donated as much. So we will deliver them out to the larders. The ready meals, we've always produced ready meals, even though over the pandemic, so we will deliver those and continue to deliver those out to the larders as required. In addition to that, what we do is I'll look at and monitor the sort of market share, what's happening out there and what things, the likes of what is difficult to cook. And we look at that, and then that's the kind of things that we will purchase to make it easier for people to cook. And with the programmes tying into that, and our dietitians going out to the larders with us to try and train the trainer. The idea is to train the trainer so they can deliver small courses on food techniques, cooking within their own communities, over and above what we would do on the food education side of things. We do know that the numbers coming and attending our food banks, or our food larders, sorry, is increasing, but it is that dignified approach. But it's not everybody every week. There's different numbers coming. There's different levels coming, and our members of the food larders is over about 1,200 just now. But they don't come every week. There's periods of time when they do come and they require, but they know they can come. And there is people from out with different areas that are visiting different larders as well within the communities. So we are monitoring them quite closely, and we will support them with additional items. We do review those items and what we can order through a company called Linus, who can provide those domestic items for us, and we will get them and then get them delivered out over the next couple of months, which has already started, to be honest. But we have to utilise the items that they can get for us, because there is other areas asking for similar items within and nationally. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Just to come back in there, I'd really appreciate Mark's update there. And if I could just add on about the food banks. Are the food banks seeing their contributions and the public contributions going down? It's, I mean, I'm just, we're not short of food. We're short of food with dignity. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Mackay.
Very much, and apologies, Provost. It was to just ask a very specific question on, I suppose it's qualifying criteria, and that is, as this crisis develops, unfortunately, I think people will move into need at different points here. And for particularly some of the national supports, there are qualifying dates set. When I look to, for instance, our 390,000 that we want to augment the Scottish Child Bridging payments, which again is something that I'm happy with, but again it's about just some assurances in terms of qualifying date, because you might actually be in need at the time, but your need didn't develop at the time of the qualifying date. So it's how are we actually dealing with that set of circumstances?
I suppose, you know, like there's some of these we do have qualifying dates, but we have a range of different ways that we can support people. And I'm sure through, you know, the range of supports that are both within, you know, like Joe's team, John Dalton's team, and, you know, directly Joe's team, we have a range of different ways we could do that. we'll talk about this, you know, in the next paper and all that. The drive from here is about compassion. If people are coming to us saying that they can't, you know, they don't have food, they can't, you know, load their range, we cannot solve cost of living crisis on our own, but we can treat people compassionately and try and make sure that every contact from a, you know, a member of council staff has that built in. So if people come and they've got particular circumstances, we'll look at that, and we have a range of ways that we can support people.
Okay, folks. Councillor Richardson.
It was just a quick question, Provost. As an ex-pupil of Cutsdale Primary back in the day, I was really interested to see that Cutsdale, you know, kitchens being opened up. And I know the idea is to then prepare the food there and take it out to the larders. Also, you've got a big dining room area there, and I would think you've probably got, you know, tables, chairs, etc. Is there any thoughts maybe about making the Cutsdale dining room one of the hubs, not just for the people of Cutsdale, but for Belfield as a whole? Maybe making it one of the hubs where people can go to Cutsdale Primary and get a hot meal. Because believe me, the mince and dough balls and the sponge and custard was to die for. And I'm sure that a lot of people in Belfield would like to drop into Cutsdale Primary, the ones that are in need, to get a hot meal. And if we're cooking the food there, does it not make sense to open up so that people can go and get a meal there?
That was the case, David. It was used before for members. The public could drop in. But Mark will answer that.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we have discussed that only this morning, to be truthful. And Chris Walker is attending meetings with Annika Friel and her team about these warm spaces. And we have considered Kirkstyle being used for that type of thing.
Maybe just to add into that, I mean, I think one of the things around the warm spaces that we're kind of looking to do at the moment was obviously map the whole of East Ayrshire. And I think some of the things that we've already talked about, we've got lunch clubs, we've got existing, some of the schools as well have already started to develop community spaces within the schools, plus the kind of leisure facilities and also some of the community run facilities. So I think the key to this, and again, I suppose reflecting the cost of living and energy costs, is about trying to kind of find community places, as we said, a kind of more central point, or places that are open, to kind of try and kind of map that so that people know within their communities the kind of places that are available and they can get access to in that more kind of welcoming way. So as well as obviously looking to kind of identify the gaps, and obviously, as Mark's already highlighted, around the likes of Patna and Mauchline and stuff where they don't have larders, then those would be the kind of things we're doing. But that mapping exercise, I think, is the critical part in terms of where the needs are and where we've already got provision that we can build on.
Yep, thanks for that, folks. Yeah, it's a really unusual set of circumstances, an unusual time that we find ourselves in. Those poor folks in Ukraine are in a war. It feels like we are going into a war footing for this winter, and we're not at war. So it's absolutely shocking that we find ourselves in this situation. Can I pass plaudits over to John's team for all that work that was done at Loudon Academy? I think the decision made by this council 2011, John, to set the financial inclusion team up. Sorry?
2013.
13, thank you. It's an age thing with me. I think that was absolutely the right thing to do because it gave you guys the experience and all the knowledge to jump straight into Loudon Academy and know exactly where to signpost those folk. And about 35 million we're at. 35 million, folks. For folk that don't know, the financial inclusion team have highlighted £35 million, up more than that now, to individuals and families who didn't know they were entitled to that since 2013. So that's how good that, I think that above all else, that's the most financial impact on our communities that we've ever done. So please continue. Plaudits, of course, for your local team who won last week, same as the mighty Kelly. But so that's good for Ayrshire. But it's great that you guys, and please again from all of us, well done to the team. If you need extra resources, I am sure the officers will help because we will need that resource going into the winter. I'm going to ask Councillor Cowan and then we'll move on. Elaine.
Oh, thank you, Provost. I just want to add to what you said there regarding the financial inclusion team. My former employment with the local MP, we often referred people to the team, so it wasn't just through the council channels that the community was benefiting from these financial inclusions officers and the other partners that John links into, Citizens Advice and the Lemonade Energy Advice. So it certainly is a wider scope that team has, not just internally within the council structures.
Yeah, Councillor Mackay.
Just as an absolute final, because of some of the discussion that we've had, are we absolutely clear, and I think that's important as once we determine this paper and then move into the next one, is that the intention is for these financial inclusion officers to be working across the education groups, not merely the education secondary schools that we have. So I think that's because, again, there's some variance just in wording, and I know these things readily happen across papers, but just so that we are absolutely explicit, it's education groups that we are actually recruiting people and placing people in for. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Provost. Yes, absolutely. Each financial inclusion officer, and they will have a financial inclusion assistant, and they will serve a catchment of education groups. Yeah, thank you.
No, thanks for that. That was my understanding as well. Now, finally, can we just make sure that once we go into the winter, there's going to be a lot of folk that we might not catch. That's what I'm worried about. There can be folk out there with a lot of pride that don't want to go out and ask for help. And it's just to make sure that we double our efforts to make sure that every single person is getting a warm meal at least once a day, and they know where their warm space is in their community. It might be a lot easier in the rural districts because everybody knows each other, but there'll always be somebody that will fall through the safety net, and we need to make sure that everybody is informed with dignity. That, and I know, and Katie's absolutely right, I would have called it what it's called during the war, but Katie says no, it's dignity, and we will try and encourage folk to come along to engage, and while they do that, they'll get a warm meal. So can we make sure that as much people as possible are informed of what's available in their area? Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Provost, if I could just come back in on just one final point. As far as the financial inclusion officers are concerned, John's team is also involved in putting financial inclusion officers into the GP surgeries. So just, I don't know whether John wants to just perhaps tell us where we're up to with that. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding us, but I thought everybody knew that. If they didn't, John?
Yeah, just a brief update. We currently have financial inclusion staff based within the 5 GP practices within Kilmarnock, and also Dolmelliton Medical Practice and the Tanyard Medical Practice in Cumnock. We've had tentative discussions early on because the Scottish Government made additional funding available for rural communities. The Improvement Service, who are operating this on behalf of the Scottish Government, have this week came back to open up discussions on expanding that to 4 other identified practices, and we'll be having discussions with them in the weeks in front to see whether we're going to expand that project or not, using the funding that's provided by the Scottish Government.
Right, thanks folks. We accept this paper, and we'll give all those officers all the support we can coming into the winter months, and we hope it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. Can we agree the recommendations? Great, thank you very much, folks. We're going on to the additional item in the papers, and it's additional item. This is a review of the school meal payments, and I'm going to ask Andrew Kennedy to introduce this report.
Thanks, Provost. Just for some background information for all members, this report was presented to Cabinet yesterday, and following that discussion, it was asked that it was be presented to Council today. The report itself was a response to issues raised in the previous cost of living report that was brought to Cabinet on the 21st of September, and just sets out kind of the background around school meal debt, how payments are managed within the service, and obviously looking at obviously the other impacts around food within school meals, that some of the points already have touched on. So just as a kind of brief outline of the report, the background just sort of sets out some of that context in terms of current free school meal entitlement, which has obviously been extended significantly over the last couple of years. And we now have, as well as early years meals, free meals for all 2, 3 and 4 year olds at nursery. You've also got primary 1 to primary 5 now who are receiving free school meals. Also noted, just in terms of the cost of a school meal, we've held the price for a standard 2-course meal at £2.15 since 2019. And obviously the catering service, paragraph 10 just highlights obviously the current uptake, as was mentioned earlier. Over COVID, there was significant changes in terms of service operations, but since sort of kind of Easter this year, and again since August, we've started to see a significant increase back to the pre-COVID numbers. We are serving about 7,500 school meals a day at the moment, and obviously that still has a fairly low uptake in terms of the overall numbers of pupils in schools. Recognising that the activities that we've talked about in terms of just the school meal payments and free school meals, there is also a range of other inclusive assistance within the school environment. Has been mentioned as well around surplus meals that are packed up and offered in a dignified way at the end of the school day. We've also got breakfast clubs which are heavily subsidised or supported by external organisations, and a range of other supports including washing facilities, cooking classes, as well as obviously things like stationery, uniforms, etc., that are all provided where people need them within their local schools. In addition to the council's wider website, there's more specific financial inclusion information available through the GLOW system within education as well. And again, a lot of that information is regularly promoted. So just in terms of the school meal payments, just I suppose just for some background, again, the council's operated since 2016 a parent pay system, which is effectively an online system that allows parents to pay for their school meals, but it also is linked to the kind of management arrangements within the school. So it covers a whole range of payments, not just school meals. And the parent pay system links to our catering point of sale system as well. And clearly that kind of, those two systems connect to each other.
Sure you're on, I can see it. Good man, that's grand.
Somebody mute that. So again, what that does is allow obviously cashless payments, and again sort of reducing that risk where you've got young people who are entitled to free school meals and paid meals being treated differently at the point of sale. We also have a standard circular which was titled Welfare Arrangements in School Meals, and again that supports the arrangements to ensure that every child who is presenting for a meal gets some nutritious meal at lunchtime, and whether that's whether they'll get money on their account or not. And essentially the system is operated effectively on a £10 overdraft facility, and clearly there's lots of information and communication with parents just around those kind of low balance accounts, and they'll be notified when it drops below that level to take action. The council also does follow through arrangements where debts are built up, and obviously I've circulated a bit more information, which was also asked for yesterday, just in terms of some of the breakdowns of that detail behind the current debts within the system. But paragraphs 20 to 24 just highlights the kind of key points or the kind of summaries around that in terms of the level of debt within the parent pay system, and then also there's a level of debt that's also then been transferred in terms of historic debt into the council's debt management system. What the paper ultimately is looking to do is provide some additional measures and some reassurances for members as well that there is a clear processes and there is supports in place, but it's obviously identified a number of areas that we think will strengthen that support to families who are going into school meal debt. I think from the information that there's clearly is a variety of groups within the current numbers that are in debt, and that includes those who are maybe in between free school meal entitlements, also where they have moved from free school meals in primary 5 and now are required to pay in primary 6. And then there's a significant level of debt that's held on the account where young people have left school, as you can see from some of the attached information. What we're proposing from paragraph 25 is a number of measures that we believe will significantly strengthen the support to families in terms of managing the school meal debt. As has already been mentioned, the financial inclusion officers that are being brought in to work directly within the schools, I think will help kind of move towards that preventative approach that's been mentioned earlier as well, and really sort of try to kind of support people on the basis potentially school meal debt is also part of a wider challenge, as we see debt potentially increasing from a number of other sources in the coming months. I won't go into detail in terms of the financial inclusion officers. There is some further information in this report, and obviously Joe's provided more details, but clearly what we're looking to do is integrate that referral process around those families who are building up debt in school meals through to the financial inclusion officers within that approach to provide as much assistance as possible. We do have a facility for the council to offer discretionary free school meals due to hardship. This is something that's done on a kind of isolated basis, but we're keen to kind of promote the work around that. And again, linking between the financial inclusion officers and guidance staff within schools, then we'd look to kind of be able to offer additional options there to offer sort of short-term support. And again, that's where you've got those kind of issues, for example, where Councillor Mackay's already mentioned, where there's maybe a gap in terms of people being aware of their circumstances to the actual payments coming through. The third area clearly, and again was mentioned this morning, around promotion of free school meals and obviously the school meal service in general in terms of what is offered for the price. There are a number of additional payments that have come in over the last 2 years that are based on that free school meal entitlement. And we've seen that now that even in terms of direct payments and the cost of school meals, there's a value over £1,000 per child on an annual basis. And again, linked to some of the work that we're doing around cost of living and some of the campaigns around school meals, then we'd look to kind of continue to promote and increase the numbers. And as I've said, we're already seeing that increase over the last few months. The next area was obviously looking around that debt management and the support around that. That clearly there are council procedures and arrangements to escalate that debt management support, and the proposals in the paper are looking just to kind of extend the timelines just to provide a bit more time to allow parents to manage their financial circumstances. And we do have evidence that a number of families are using the debt element of school meals and paying in arrears. And again, delaying the escalation of those kind of reports and information being passed to the finance system, then that would also give, as well as giving parents the opportunity just to manage their finances, also allow additional time for the financial inclusion team, etc., to get involved and support families. The final point is really just noting the universal free school meals for primary schools is intended to continue to be rolled out, and we're anticipating we'll hear further information in the next few months around the timelines for that. But clearly we would want to kind of continue to kind of keep this position in terms of school meal payments under review, and we'd look to kind of report back to Cabinet in the coming months. And again, linked to what Joe's already said, I think this area is one of the areas we'd look to incorporate into the general cost of living information that will be regularly provided to members. So I would just note the points that I've made, and obviously ask members just to consider the recommendations that are set out in paragraph 2, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, members, open it up. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, and thank you for that again, Andrew. And we know there was extensive discussion yesterday round about this paper at Cabinet. I think one thing that there are a couple of things for me, and a couple of messages that need to be made perfectly clear to us. One, that we will not turn a child away for a school meal. And I know historically there's been a couple of cases that were mentioned at Cabinet, but I think through staff training that shouldn't happen again. I think the second, and we as a council can't be judgmental or punitive with any family that cannot afford to pay for school meals. And I think our investment in our financial inclusion team clearly demonstrates that on behalf of the council. But really importantly, we need to be fair and take recognise that all families, often in really difficult circumstances, who do pay for their school meals, we have processes in place, and officers using their face values will ensure that those who have real difficulty paying are supported and the debt managed, resulting in a positive outcome for the families. I propose we look at each situation individually through those processes, and if it means setting a sum of money aside for positive outcomes, then so be it. But importantly, it will ensure that fairness to families that do pay is built in. Andrew, you said that you would report back as well. So how often would you report back to Cabinet on that one? On the debt and how it's been dealt with?
I think in terms of the point that was made earlier on that Joe was talking about, just in terms of that overall cost of living information, then I think we could certainly look to provide updates on a monthly basis or that kind of level, if that was what members were keen to see.
Would that be inclusive, not just the school debt, but all debts as they're arising, coming for all the services, to give us a bigger picture of how the cost of living is affecting us as we move forward into the winter?
Oh, yeah.
Through you, Provost, I think that will be a challenge. I think it could be something that could be done, but to capture debt and report it at several points in the year will, you know, there are different types of debt. We carry historical council tax debt, and you know, we do have a duty to collect what is outstanding. There is a middle ground, and as Chief Exec's touched on it, it's done with compassion. I think the discussions yesterday and today heighten that need to collect what is outstanding in a way that's dignified and compassionate. But I think trying to capture all of the council's debt across every service and do that on a frequent basis, I think would present some challenges. I'm happy, Provost, to go away and maybe work up some proposals, perhaps around the largest part, recognising, of course, that as Pauline said today, in terms of the strategic plan, some of those are already presented in terms of indicators, in terms of council tax collection, non-domestic rates and the like. So they already exist, but I'm happy, Provost, to take that one away.
Councillor Barton.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks again, Andrew, for taking us through that paper. It was just as good the second time around. So, I mean, I welcome the inclusive assistance already in place that's listed in paragraph 11 of the paper. I also welcome the proposed additional measures listed in paragraphs 25 to 32. I think the discretionary free meals proposal was a great idea, and I fully support that. I would, however, like to propose a small amendment to paragraph 35 to add that discretionary free meals awarded by the financial inclusion officers, it can be backdated up to a period of 8 weeks, not just forward.
That's an amendment, a proposed amendment to the paper. Yeah, so you made the proposal, you need a seconder.
Yeah.
Councillor Richardson, yep. Thanks for that. David, yeah.
Just going to two quick points and proceed. One, it's obviously the amendments to recommendation fee in paragraph 2. That's what members have been asked to vote on. And the effect of the amendment is simply that the 8 weeks discretionary would not necessarily be the next 8 weeks or the future 8 weeks. It can take account of previous weeks, and that would be the nature of the amendment.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Probably, I don't know if anyone's otherwise minded that one. That one certainly Cabinet wasn't, I think, subject to any contention. So I don't know if it's easy to just take that and agree that as an amendment, or if anyone is otherwise minded.
Folks, was everybody? I'll bring you in a minute, Maureen. Was everybody understand what Councillor Barton proposed there? We're okay. Yeah. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. Yes, and I do understand, and yes, I'm perfectly okay with it. I suggested yesterday that it was a very excellent addition. Equally, I just want to suggest that, sorry, I'm at a stage where I'm lost for words now, not like me. Councillor Cowan yesterday also mentioned at Cabinet that when we look at how we actually manage debt, that if we were to see a reduction in the number of letters that went out to evidence debt, that would be a very good marker of whether or not we were actually succeeding in what our aim is. And again, I commended that at Cabinet yesterday, and I want to commend that suggestion. I think that's very creative thinking, and that's very much like has already been suggested about going further upstream to look at, rather than waiting for there to be an event, let's actually look at how we can capture the information around that. So that's very positive. Andrew, you were good enough to provide us with a paper in relation to information that was asked for yesterday, and that information was really around, I think, and you've tried to answer some of that, around the table that's at paragraph 21. So that's helpful. That's new. Regrettably, it came to us at 10:05 this morning when we were already actually in this meeting. I wonder if you'd like to take us through that. We've got that in front of us, please. So what are the points that you would seek to make from that? How does that actually relate to, because that was really the level of analysis of school meal debt that I had hoped when we raised this back in September that we would actually have with this. So if we could be taken through that, please, and also relate it to the very helpful appendix, which is at Appendix 1, which just makes the differential between people who are entitled to free school meals and people who are entitled to clothing grant but not free school meals. Okay. Again, regrettably, I suspect that there are several members in the chamber who do not have that paper sitting in front of them at the moment. Thank you.
Paper copies were circulated at interval, yeah, for all members.
Of yours, but not of the Cabinet paper.
Sorry, after Cabinet made the decision yesterday, we circulated notice to all members that the Cabinet item had been deferred to today, and we reissued an electronic copy of that Cabinet paper on the basis that that's the way the agenda is also issued for the full meeting. So members who aren't on Cabinet have had sight of the Cabinet paper, A, when the agenda's first issued, and all members get sight of it last week, and B, specific attention was drawn to Cabinet's decision and the deferral of this paper to here today, and further copies were circulated electronically to all members yesterday, so no, members don't have a third paper copy of yesterday's Cabinet paper in front of them, but if any member feels that's necessary, I'll go and get one just now.
I certainly read that's the way it was going to be. So the actual paper on the school meals discussion was brought to council because it was deferred yesterday. That's my understanding.
That's absolutely fine, Provost, and thank you, David, for the explanation then.
So in terms of the additional information that was provided today in terms of the statistics, there's a number of tables that are presented in that attachment. And if I go back to the main paper, just in terms of the analysis between paragraph 20 and 24, the information that was provided, there's two systems essentially which holds the level of debt. One of them is the parent pay system, which is the active system where parents will see that they're in a debt, and then as they reach a trigger point, that debt is transferred through to the finance system effectively, which issues an invoice and is dealt with separately. So the first section of the report is in relation to what is in the live system essentially. What we've tried to do is, and again, these are based on the figures that were from June 22, basically just as a kind of end of the year point rather than obviously a live point that is changing day to day. So again, just to kind of give a bit of feedback, that first table is just looking at a number of children and families who they have free school meal entitlement in the system, but there is also a debt attached to their account. There are a number of families who are entitled to clothing grant, but not free school meals. And again, that's where Councillor Mackay has referred to the appendix in the main report and the difference between those two criteria. There's also a number of leavers, and obviously, as you'll see in further tables, where they have accrued a debt before they leave. And then there is a final section, which is essentially just that other group of parents where we don't have any further information in terms of their financial situation, etc. And that accounts for about just short of 1,400 pupils. Obviously, the number of families would potentially be different, but within the records we hold, it's per pupil. So just in terms of the following paragraphs is just taking a wee bit more detail around each of those areas. And again, what we've identified and was discussed yesterday, where there is a point in time when families are entitled to free school meals or maybe not actually receive formal confirmation of them, there does tend to be a gap. Where we know those families, that gap is identified, then we would remove that debt through the process. But clearly there is also an element in there which is an overspend, where a child is basically buying additional items over and above their entitlement in terms of the financial allocation that goes into the system. Clothing grant and the debt leavers effectively just broken down in terms of pupil ages, and again looking at some of that sort of post free school meal, and again that's where there's clearly different changes in circumstances that we're aware of, and there's obviously gaps there in terms of their entitlement. The leavers again is just broken down in terms of years, and again particularly that kind of 1920, which was at the end of or at the start of COVID. Clearly there was a significant level of debt held on the system that wasn't paid back. The other pupil debt, again, all really been able to do there is highlight the I suppose the year groups and obviously the age of that debt around it. The following paragraph maybe just gives a wee bit more information there, just in terms of some evidence where there are a number of families who are continuing to build up debts within that process. and obviously some of those are obviously making payments through that kind of debtor account that's already been issued. And then the non-debt payment habits, again, what we're seeing there, there's over 700 families or child accounts that are showing that there is an arrears and then it's paid back, or there's regular payments being made, even though they may still hold a small debt on a regular basis. So again, that was kind of really just to try and give a kind of wider context of the management of those debt arrangements is very different depending on the individual circumstances that was highlighted. The final table is just that next phase, which is the information that's then been sent to the finance system and issued through those sort of more formal arrangements that was covered. And again, an amount of that over time is obviously repaid, and then there's amount that's obviously written off, and obviously that's through the current formal arrangements through Chief Finance Officer, Chief Governance Officer around those debts, and then there's an amount in the recovery stage, and then there's an amount that's identified as the kind of bad debts, which from an accounting point of view then effectively is taken out of my budget effectively in terms of a gap. But I'm not sure whether maybe Joe would want to come in a wee minute or two to kind of provide a bit more information around that. In terms of your other point, in terms of the appendix, the entitlement to free school meals and clothing grants, there's clearly a set criteria. The bigger difference between the two is around that kind of income level that's in families, and obviously those figures are set by the UK government as part of that wider kind of free school meal entitlement based on income.
Okay. I'll wait till I hear what Joe has to say. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, please.
Thank you, and through you, Provost. So without wanting to confuse matters further, the table second from the right, the column that's listed bad debt, is an adjustment that's made. So where an organisation sends out an invoice, it's required to make an adjustment to that amount for bad and doubtful debts. And so essentially what happens is that in day one, the service that's responsible for the debt would issue a debtors account. And in issuing that debtors account, the family would receive that. But at the same time, the council's financial processes pays that money to the service so that the service gets that credit, that gain on day one. Thereafter, under the bad debt provisions, it's required that the council estimates the amount of that debt that will be prolonged and will take many weeks or months to collect, or may in fact never be collected. And so there's an adjustment made to that called a bad debt provision. And what you're seeing in that column there, and you're seeing no adjustment made yet for 22-23, and that's right and proper because we're still in the period when we believe that debt will be fully repaid. But as you go back the way, you then see adjustments made, and as Andrew said, on day one, £100 invoice is issued, and Andrew's budget receives £100. As that goes through the process, adjustments are made back to the service to account for the amount of the debt that is now unpaid or bad debt provided for. And so in that column, that's that column to the second on the right, that is the amount of the £22,000 that has been fully provided for. In other words, it has been assumed that that debt is a bad debt. It is not written off. That's a different process entirely. We have debts on our system that are fully provided for, but recovery still takes place, but we're required to recognise that it's bad and doubtful. And that's what that column's doing then. So it's recognising that within that £22,000, there's a significant element of it, the majority of it, that in terms of the council's processes that are inspected and reviewed by external audit, that the majority of that £18,300 has been assumed to be 100% bad and has been provided for, and as Andrew touched on, budgets adjusted accordingly.
Continue. Thank you very much. Okay, so just for clarity then, what was looked at yesterday was the issue of what do we as an authority, what do we as a council want to be doing in terms of actually chasing people for money who, when they are in the circumstances that we are being presented with, they have run up debt, when what they are actually trying to do is provide for their children. We've heard a great deal this morning about care and compassion. So happy with what the recommendations are. I had an additional ask yesterday, which is why we have this paper with us today, and that is, yes, we can see exactly what the overall look is in terms of what the debt is. We've also in the paper been presented with a figure of historic debt, which is the one that Andrew has taken us through, basically just under £23,000 today, and has given us the breakdown of that. So my question remains the question that was set yesterday, in terms of there is clearly an opportunity within some funding that we have, where we have the opportunity to effectively say that we are giving a moratorium on what people have as a level of debt at the moment in light of this cost of living crisis, and that we are creating an opportunity to look at us not pursuing further action against parents or activity against parents, to look to effectively clear all of their accounts, on the basis that we will have some parents who would be in financial difficulty to do that. Okay, so having said that, Andrew, I'm then coming back to you to say, based on that.
Sorry, sorry for interjecting. Is that a proposal that you're stating at the moment?
No,
no, right,
no, I'm
okay.
not, because I'm seeking clarification, Provost, to be able to quantify that. That's the principle which I'm setting out. I'm trying to get us a financial value associated with that. So again, having set that out and having had this additional paper today, Andrew, what would be the figure in terms of people who it looks unlikely that they are going to be in a position to be clearing their debt, in terms of that historic debt? And I'm underlining that historic debt.
I'm not sure if there's necessarily a specific figure that would be able to kind of provide that element of the historic debt. As said in the additional, what is in the debtor system as historic debt is obviously that 22,000 figure that was mentioned. But as Joe said, there's an element of a budget implication for 18,000 of that that wouldn't necessarily be required as a budget figure. But obviously the 22,000 that's in the debtor system is obviously the ones that have moved to that sort of debt recovery process. The amounts that are in the parent pay system, there's obviously still an element shown in the other tables that would be, I suppose, historic debt as well, because obviously some of those figures do go back 2 to 3 years. For example, the levers figure of £5,000 is obviously for young people that have either left from primary school into secondary school, or the vast majority of that's actually young people that have left secondary school as well. So I suppose in terms of that kind of likelihood of recovery, then there's maybe a need to kind of add in a figure like that to get to, I think, what you're looking for in terms of a reasonableness.
No, that I understand now where you're coming from. No, absolutely. Joe, is Councillor Mackay, is there a way to identify those parents that could afford to pay and haven't paid? Because that was the crux of your question. Those that were in serious debt because of trying to feed their children, they didn't have the money to feed for it, to pay for it. How could you in any way delve into that to find that out? Because that's where I think Councillor Mackay was coming from, without putting words in your mouth.
That's very fair. What we're looking for here, and I know this isn't an exact science, and I am accepting that isn't an exact science. What we're trying to look for is how we are attempting effectively here to be as fair as we possibly can against any decisions that we take, and really trying to be as impartial, my colleague has said to me, and as just against the circumstances that there have been. Again, I'm looking at, yes, we've seen various changes across the pandemic. I'm looking going back on a 3-year basis based on what Andrew has said. That appears to me to be a reasonable cut-off point when I am presented with these figures here, given that we have had the experience of COVID. So I'm grateful for you, and I'll be more grateful, I think, for Joe when he gives me some actual figures.
Well, that's absolutely fine. It carries on from the last discussion at a previous council, where I thought that all the members agreed to let the officers go away and look at that. But if that's not enough for you, Maureen, then absolutely we'll ask Joe how he can delve into this.
Thank you, and again through you, Provost. I suppose you would expect me to say that there's a requirement to collect debt. It's fundamental, and I need to make that point to you today. However, I recognise the pressures before us, and I recognise the impacts on cost of living. I suppose for me, in terms of the figure that was originally discussed, we have essentially 2 types of debt. One you could class as current, that sits in parent pay, that we learned from Andrew and colleagues yesterday, is being managed in a way that it's being maintained and sustained, and that's generally well. And then we have a debt sitting on the finance system. It's this finance system debt that then has the follow-up that Andrew mentioned, and it has the weeks, and it has the ultimate sanction at the back end of it. And so for me, I would maybe, in terms of suggesting a figure, I would be uncomfortable recommending to you that it would be the entirety of the debt, including the current debt, because we have a requirement to collect debt. But perhaps, given the information in the final table that shows the 22,237, recognising that some of that, the majority of that, has already been adjusted from the school meals budget, but recognising the pressure that budget is under, you may be minded to set aside the 22,237. In terms of trying to identify who could pay and who can't pay, I think that would be quite a significant task to undertake, but nonetheless it could be done. So I suppose the option is for council to decide whether or not you have an adjustment of the 22,237, or whether you have an adjustment of the 22,237, which is parked to the side to allow officers time to go through on a case-by-case basis. And I suppose that's the 2 points I would make. And it's very important for me to highlight to you that that current debt, recognising that over time that may become aged too, but at this point in time, my recommendation to you would be to maintain that debt, as that current debt as it is, but to perhaps, if so minded, to consider the aged part and along those two options.
Very much. On that basis, what I would be proposing to then add on as an additional recommendation is that we would look to address that historic debt. In that we would look to the funding that we have available for us, that we have set aside for cost of living, that we would have, I don't know if moratorium is the appropriate word in relation to that, and that is not debt that would be being carried forward. And we make that very clear that we have all of the other supports here, and we would be encouraging people to make use of the current supports. I am trying to get us to a stage where we have a fresh starting point for people, and then we move forward with all of the supports that we have. I don't know if I will have a seconder for that. It's a proposal that I'm making.
I will second that.
Thanks, Provost.
Hold on just a minute, Jim. So I've had a proposal, and the proposal is that you're setting aside that debt that Joe highlighted.
If I go back, it is 3849. I understand it is 7497, Joe, I think, and 3185, if I can very quickly add that up. So basically, it's the last three figures in the bottom column. I'm sorry, I haven't a calculator with me. 13, 21.
I think you need to come up with a figure, Maureen, because...
Yeah, that's okay. If I can just get 2 minutes, then I will. Thank you.
Through you, Provost, and I could just clarify, Councillor Mackay, it's £14,531.
Yeah.
But just to be mindful then that the proposal is to have a moratorium on the aged debt from 2020-21 through to 2022-23, yes. Only for those 3 years. Yes. Okay. 14,531.
Thank you. Yep, sorry, I wasn't quite quick enough to get there.
I shall second Councillor Mackay.
Thanks, John. Goodness sake, right. Thanks. We've got a proposal and a second. Does everybody understand that? No, right. Oh, yeah, I'm going to bring you in. Proposal and seconder. Councillor McMahon.
Provost, if I can refer back to my comments previously, I think there's a kind of dancing around about the head and a pin here. Right. My words were, I propose we look at each situation individually through those processes, and if it means setting aside a sum of money for positive outcomes, then so be it. But importantly, it will ensure that fairness to families that do pay is built in. So I've already proposed that we set aside a sum of money and we go and look at it. Now that sum of money, whatever it is under the circumstances, we will look at.
Hold. There's some folk in. Councillor Hogg.
I think I got a bit carried away in the conversation. I've kind of forgotten now. What I was going to say was the debt letter. Does that automatically flag up at schools to put in help for families when they get the debt letter? Does that go to the schools as well? This is just for my clarification. I don't know.
Yes, I think what we've done obviously over the last couple of months as well is reviewed that paperwork, and again, obviously the other recommendations that are in this report is obviously for Linda and myself to kind of again review and strengthen that, but very much that kind of early intervention element that's reflected in here, where we wouldn't be looking to raise those debts to the next level. Again, it's about that communication and highlighting the other supports that are available. And again, as John's team starts to develop around that, then that hopefully would strengthen further.
And can I ask, if there was a moratorium put on, people who have paid, would they be accessible to any sort of rebate?
Provost, members, if the aspiration is to remove any risk that anybody who's in hardship be pursued for debts that already exist by the council, then trying to quantify that, as Councillor Mackay has said herself, and I think everyone recognises from the surfeit of figures flying about here, it's not an exact science. Because as is explained in detail in both papers, the way people deal with their debt, the way they pay their account, some folk pay in arrears, some folk put money in for the beginning of the month and work off credit. So some run it as a credit account, some run it as a deposit account. But the bottom line is that within the existing arrangements, not only do you need to have the safety net that we write off debt that's hard to recover, because fine, people need to get to the point of having been written to, what is sought as an assurance that those in genuine hardship won't be pursued for debt incurred, quite rightly. Nobody's disputing the actual objective because they try to feed their children. The question is how to achieve that. It's been acknowledged that there's not an exact science, but then we've taken 3 years and 3 figures out of the table to come up with a figure. If council wants assurance and to minute council's requirement that officers, legal education and the proper officer will not pursue any parent for that debt where they were in hardship when it was incurred. That is a decision you can take without quantifying that, and that is a decision that we can implement on your behalf without actually at this stage quantifying what amount of debt that affects. What it will affect is, and what it will give effect to, is the objective you all seem to be trying to achieve of not having us, and we don't do it for fun, chasing or pursuing anybody for a school meal debt where that person or that family were in hardship. Not just entitled to free school meals because there wouldn't be a debt, but other levels of hardship. So what we will do is, and we do take a sensitive approach to these, is we build in something that makes sure that before we write, there is that extra liaison. It was a good question from Councillor Hogg, because most debts, and let's not just focus on school meals, the processes we have cover all debts across all services, and they have actually stood us in quite good stead for 26 years. But the bottom line is we can refine that one and provide that safety net that before even the first letter goes out, we make a higher level of inquiry and we check with the school directly, and we make sure that the person is not in the category that you would wish to preserve and protect, quite rightly. And that removes the risk of wiping out debt that is owed by people who don't fall in that category. It also removes the greater risk that those who don't fall in that category and would be expected to pay in the future decide not to pay because they don't have to pay because we've stopped chasing the debt. So it's the impact on, it's the unintended effect of applying an intended benefit in the small capital, not the capital B benefit, to a particular group and not actually having it applied with unintended effect to all people in that group, where not all of them require the benefit you're trying to deliver. And we've seen this a lot recently. There was articles just this week. The World Bank is making comment that the universal approach to COVID relief was not the best idea, and that the universal approach to cost of living, and this is what the World Bank said this week, is not the best approach, because you're including everybody to benefit some. So I'm trying to suggest, members, with the greatest respect, it's not about quantifying a sum of money, it's about building into the minute that this council is requiring its officers not to pursue the debt in cases of genuine hardship, and you have that assurance. If you're happy with that, you don't need to struggle to try and quantify, because the figure you come up with today, what you've been told is it'll be different tomorrow and it'll be different next week.
So from an audit point of view, where does that figure ever appear again? So if you, the council, want to make the decision and require officers to make sure that no letters go out, to take Councillor Cowan's point, no letters go out to anyone who's in that hardship position, because we build in that extra level of check and balance and go back to the school and have that level of conversation, because they're not big numbers, then we will do that to make sure that the only people being pursued for debt are those who are not in hardship.
Oh, thanks for that. David interjected there, but Councillor Hogg asked a question. Andrew, could you answer Councillor Hogg's question, and then we'll move on.
Sorry. I suppose David's point has maybe just covered that.
So Provost, through you, because you are the chair, but it was just to clarify, the question was, do we make those checks? And what I'm saying is, no, as a matter of standard practice, we don't, but that would be the proposal, is to add in that further check that we do not put a debt recovery, a standard format debt recovery letter out to anyone who was in hardship at the time the debt was incurred. And that concludes checking with the schools. So that's an extra check is what we'd build in.
My understanding was Councillor Hogg asked, would there be a retrospective payback to those parents that had already paid?
There's a couple of points, sorry, I forgot them. The first one is, a moratorium is just a deferral. So a moratorium would need to come back, right? So you either make a decision today or make a decision to bring it back. So a moratorium would be, and we can go and look at it, but the figures still vary. The answer would be, from the council's perspective, it would depend on what you decide. If the council makes it clear that this is, for a given period of time or to apply to a respective period, then yes, we would be saying to people, the arrears, the debts that haven't been paid have been written off, but the debts that were paid were never written off. They were duly paid, they were properly owed, they were properly paid. So the council's position, unless you, the council, tell us officers differently, would be no, we wouldn't automatically be rebating those who had paid if they weren't in hardship. But you would need to open up the point about retrospectivity. If you wish to protect those currently in hardship with debt, then what position do you want to take with those who have actually paid debt in the past when they were in hardship? And where does it end?
Right, okay, guys, we've got some folk want to come in. I've got the leader. Yep, you're doing it, Graham, you're doing the list. A leader was in before.
Thanks, Provost. We're not a million miles away here, and I'm just wondering whether a 5-minute recess would maybe expedite matters here. I don't know what others feel.
Is it a point of order, Graham?
It's very quick. We're getting bogged down here, and I think David's proposal is a really good idea. That's all.
No, that's absolutely fair. Thanks. Guys, the leaders proposed a 5-minute recess. I think maybe have a discussion with Maureen. Are we okay with that now? We've been here a long, long time. That's 20 past. Could we be back for 3:30 if you are in agreement?
If I can have 10 minutes, yes, please.
Is that okay, folks? Thank you very much.
Ian, could I just ask if you could stop the recording, please?
Oh.